Christ is king and Candace Owens is out at the Daily Wire. This is Can't Cancel Rob Smith. All right, problematics. Look, there's been so much going on here in media world. Let's get into this. One of the biggest things that has happened in conservative media, mainstream media, whatever, over the past couple of weeks is Candace Owens is now donezo at the Daily Wire, and she has done so in the most sort of bombastic, we will say shady fashion. We will say that there's a lot of shadiness. It just was a moment. And before I get into sort of what went down or my take on what went down between Candace and the Daily Wire, let me give you a little perspective that a lot of people that are commenting on this are not going to have, because I've worked with Candace in the past. I did the older iteration of her show at the Daily Wire. So I remember this relationship between Candace Owens and the Daily Wire started in around early 2021. And I remember there was this moment where there was a lot of conservative media that was like, oh, we're going to Nashville because the Daily Wire is there. Nashville is the next big thing, blah, blah, blah. Newsflash, it's not. Like, Nashville kind of sucks. There's nothing there. People are drunk and puking all over themselves on Broadway by like 12:30 p.m. Like, I'm sorry to my Nashville people, but Nashville ain't it. Back to the show. Now, there were two iterations of the Candace Owens show on the Daily Wire. The first one was called Candace, and this one, this is the one that I did. And so let me give you a little insight as to what it was like to do that. First of all, you know, you've got the Daily Wire. They're in this compound in Nashville. I've been to the set, and I can't even tell you where this place is. It's locked down because obviously Candace Owens is somebody that gets death threats on a daily basis. Also, you've got Matt Walsh there. He gets death threats. Ben Shapiro gets death threats from both the anti-Semites and the radical leftists. So they're getting it at from all sides. And so now their location in Nashville has to be very discreet. And when I did the first iteration of the Candace Owens show, it was kind of like this live studio audience. There was her opening monologue. There was a panel section. It was very much, I think the vision at the very beginning was to make this almost kind of like what Megyn Kelly did when she went to NBC News. I think that it was going to be a still political, but a little lighter atmosphere. They wanted a live audience, all that stuff. Now, I did the show, and when I did that iteration of the show, I knew it wasn't working. I just remember being on set. It was just very hard to carry the conversation. And let me tell you something, there's no shade to Candace. I don't love or hate Candace Owens. I think she's a super important figure, but I'm going to keep it all the way real because I've done multiple things with Candace. I did her podcast when she had one at the PragerU. And that was like an hour-long conversation. You can find that all over YouTube, my conversation with her then. And even then, like, this is somebody that likes to speak, okay? Like, Candace likes to talk. And if you've ever interacted with her in person, it's interesting because, and everybody will say this, that what you get from her interpersonally is not what you're getting from the camera, right? She's very giggly. She's very much a girly girl. Like, she's actually super funny. But when that camera comes on, it's a different vibe. And so I did the show in its earliest iteration, and I knew, like, I've been on sets before, like I've been on live television, I've been doing these things, and you know when something is working, when it's not working. Obviously, it wasn't working. They had invited me to go down there multiple times again. I'm like, look, going down to Nashville, like that's like a day out of your life. And then I'm going to do that for a clip on social media and to be behind the Daily Wire's paywall, which isn't doing anything for me. So I kind of like passed. And from what I understand, they were having issues booking that show in that iteration, just probably for the same reason that I neglected to return a lot of the times that they invited me. It's just because I wasn't trying to go down to Nashville and sacrifice an hour of my day to do something that was only going to be seen behind the Daily Wire's paywall, right? So that's why I think that iteration of the show didn't work. They rescheduled everything. They rejiggered everything to where it became a podcast thing where it's just Candace, she's talking, and that I think is a lot more effective for the type of talent that she is, because it's a different skill to be able to moderate a conversation, have a true panel discussion, than it is to just have the people here for you. So now, That's where I think kind of the cracks started to show in this relationship. And this is all allegedly, this is all my theorizing on this as a media professional. And as somebody that is very in tune to the business of podcasting and media, which we will get into in the next segment. When her show went to Candace saying what she wanted to say, I think that, and this is true of a lot of these media entities, by the way, particularly conservative media, but I think this goes on both sides of the aisle. I think that Daily Wire would have been totally cool if Candace would have just sat on a set and did the whole Democrats are evil and Republicans are good and black people get off the Democrat plantation and all that stuff. Like, if she would have just did that, if she would have said the same thing that black conservatives had been saying, which is almost like a cliche at this point, I think they would have been fine with that. I think they would have made their money. She would have made their money. Everybody would have been happy. I do not think that Candace was happy doing that. And when you have a talent like that, who's actually a talent that has ideas and thoughts of their own, as opposed to somebody that is just sitting down on a set reading a script. Because what you have to understand also about this industry is that there are a lot of people that sit down on sets and follow scripts. These are actors that are being paid for television. Okay? She's not that person. I'm not that guy. They're like, Tucker's not that person. And you know who's being real and you know who's being fake. And say what you want about Candace, she was never being fake. That was always real. I think that that's when there became issues with her and the higher ups at Daily Wire. Now, story time. When it comes to Daily Wire, I was flown out to do a pilot for the Daily Wire, something that they were doing. I think that they were piloting the Morning Wire. And I went out there and I believe that Jeremy was the one that I met with. I wasn't getting a great sense. This was back when they were in California. I wasn't getting a great sense that these were people that I wanted to deal with for a lot of different reasons. And I would wager to say that she was getting a lot of pushback from them because these are executives running a media company, right? And I have it on fairly good authority that this whole tiff between Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro, this is not something that just started yesterday. Like, this is not something that just started with the Christ is King thing. This is something that had been going on for a long time, because no matter what you think about Candace Owens, no matter what you think about Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens is a bigger star than Ben Shapiro. I don't care about followers. I don't care about net worth. I don't care about the fact that Ben Shapiro owns this business. She's a much bigger star than him. Ben Shapiro's not going to do the Breakfast Club. Ben Shapiro's not doing the Joe Budden podcast. Ben Shapiro's not doing things that are culturally relevant. Ben Shapiro is talking to the crowd behind a paywall at the Daily Wire. These people are not the same. And I think that when you have two really big egos there, I think that there was something going on behind the scenes. Now, a lot of people are saying that Candace Owens got fired, and there's a lot of libs that are saying that, oh, well, now that her Republican money is dried up, she's got fired, blah, blah, blah. These people know absolutely nothing about the media business, and I'm going to get into the business of Candace Owens in the next segment because I find this really fascinating, and I haven't seen this take because most of the people that are running their mouths about this industry have no idea about the business that goes behind it. They're just talking out of their necks. Now, a lot of people are saying that she got fired. I do not believe that she got fired. I do not believe it. Candace Owens went to the Daily Wire in early 2021, almost 3 years to the date. My theory is that this was a 3-year contract that everybody decided was not going to be renewed 6 months ago. And I think she made a conscious decision to go out in kind of a blaze of glory and make whatever point it was that she was trying to make with the whole Christ is King thing. And also, I don't think that she got fired. I think that a contract was up. And notice, she never said she got fired. She said, I am free. Jeremy and Ben at the Daily Wire never said that we have decided to let Candace go. They said that we have parted ways. That in media speak to me speaks that the contract is over. And I think that everybody benefits here because when you're in the media game and everybody is talking about you, you're not losing. All right. There's, look, when I came out and said that I'm no longer a Republican, I'm an independent, like I got a lot of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Everybody was talking about me. Like, that's the name of the game, folks. Like, this is what it is. All right. When everybody's talking about you, you have won. It is when they are not talking about you. It is when they are not doing podcasts and YouTube videos about you and tweeting about you. That's when you're in trouble. All right. So Candace and Ben had hated each other for a really long time, and I think that it was an ego thing. on Ben Shapiro's part, because he hired somebody that I think that he thought could be controlled, and she's a much bigger star than him, and obviously she couldn't be controlled. And now I'm going to say something else that probably a lot of people in conservative media will not say, because I have an insight as to what this experience is. When you are dealing in the media industry in general, but particularly in the conservative media industry, now Candace, yeah, everybody loves Candace and all that stuff. This is still a Black woman, okay, that holds an enormous amount of power within a conservative media space that is very, very, very much so run by white dudes. I do not know and cannot speak to what her experience was, but I bet your bottom dollar that there were some people that did not like the fact that she had this much power and she has this much influence and she has this much of a following. I have seen that. I have seen that personally. I have been in circles and I've been in rooms and all of this other stuff. And people do not like when you're playing in that world, when you are somebody, and look, you can hate me, you can say whatever you want, say I'm playing the race card, call me a victim, whatever you want to call it. There are people that do not like when there are Black people that hold positions of power when it comes to money or influence or following. I do not know what the real tea is, but I do know this. There's a lot of people that do not like, in the conservative movement, by the way, too. Now, she's going to get the hatred from the left, and that's going to come. But there's a lot of people in the conservative media movement that do not like that there's this Black woman that can speak to people that they will never be able to speak to, first of all. They will never be able to speak to Black people the way that Candace Owens can. No matter what she said in the past, no matter what people think of her, she can reach Black people in the ways that they never can. And they do not like that. And that is the reality of the situation. And I am telling you, as real as I can be with the sky being blue, that had something to do with it. Allegedly. All right, problematics. So look, we're obviously talking about the big Candace Owens divorce from the Daily Wire. And I got to tell you this. Some of the absolute dumbest, absolute most moronic, the most idiot takes that I have seen from the Black libs when it comes to the Candace Owens divorce from the Daily Wire is that, oh, you know, Candace is broke now and her grift dried up and her Republican money dried up. So now she's trying to do the Joe Budden podcast. And, you know, now she's trying to go on the Breakfast Club and she's trying to do all this stuff to come crawling back to Black people. Okay. That, when I see those takes, I'm like, you people are idiots. You people literally know nothing about business. You know nothing about media. You know nothing about the industry. The only thing that you're doing is talking out of your neck, which is, by the way, why there's so few Black liberals that are actually out here owning their media businesses and that are actually out here owning their stuff. Because let me tell you something. These Black libs on the left, they get played by the media industry too. As much as the MSNBCs and as much as these liberal outlets claim to love Black people, they play these Black libs on the left as well. Look at Tiffany Cross from MSNBC. Miss Thing thought that MSNBC had her back, and Miss Thing thought that she could say whatever she wanted to say, and then MSNBC booted her. And she'll never be that big again. She'll never have that sort of institutional backing again. So yeah, so now she's in the podcasting world and she doesn't even own that podcast. She's getting a check to do it with iHeartRadio. So that's where the business comes in. So it is a joke. Anybody that is telling you that Candace Owens is going to be broke now, that she's not, you know, with the Daily Wire, whatever, has no idea about the business. First of all, let's get into the business of Candace Owens. So look, I will never reveal my sources. Lots of people talk to me about lots of things. I've seen lots of things, and I try not to be very explicit because I don't want to give away who told me what or whatever. You know, your boy is like the the Wendy Williams of politics, right? I have it on good authority that the Candace Owens deal with the Daily Wire was an 8-figure deal. That is what I have heard allegedly. Again, guys, allegedly. Allegedly, what I've heard was that was an 8-figure deal. And not only was that an 8-figure deal, that was an 8-figure deal that included hair and makeup on and off set. All right, so Miss Thing was like, look, she was getting what she needed to get from the Daily Wire, right? But when you break down the business aspect of it, it makes sense. Like them giving her an 8-figure deal to put a lot of this stuff behind the paywall when the Daily Wire is trying to get subscriptions. And by the way, Daily Wire is a $220 million a year media business. All right. It's real. And so let's get into the business of podcasting. When you're podcasting, there's a few different ways to make money. And if you've been following me, if you've been following all of this stuff, you know that I've learned a lot about the podcasting business over the past couple of years. I was with iHeart and then I wasn't, and then I was independent. And now I'm, I generally don't tell who I'm working with and all that stuff because people, whatever. Anyway, there are a few different ways that you can make money via podcasting. You can get impressions from programmatic ads, which means that if your podcast is attached to a certain network that has a deal with programmatic ads, there's a certain amount of money that you can get just from advertisers, whatever, that are advertising in that space, right? You can do ad reads, where if I'm doing an ad read, let's say for Athletic Greens, right? And I do an ad read for Athletic Greens, and then it says, blah, 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 this is the greatest thing in the world, whatever. That's a certain amount of money per ad read per episode. You can get sponsorships. You can have a company say, I want to pay you $25,000 or whatever the amount of money is for your podcast. And you just mention us at the beginning and the end. Same thing with YouTubers. And then if you have a video podcast that goes on YouTube, which by the way, Candace has over 1 million followers on YouTube. And one of the things that she was tweeting after this public divorce was to follow her on her YouTube page. You understand me? And so if you have a podcast that goes on YouTube, which you can find this podcast on youtube.com/@can'tcancelrobsmith. If you're one of my loyal problematics that's listening on iHeart, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, you can also find this on YouTube because I'm video now. And if your podcast is on YouTube, you can get sponsorships that are specific to YouTube, like interstitials that will only go into the video portion of the ad or the video portion of the podcast. And then you get your average YouTube revenue from ad rates. There's lots and lots and lots of different ways to make money from podcasting. So Candace had a podcast at PragerU. That was when I did my first interview with Candace, 2018, 2019-ish, years ago. You can still find that on YouTube. It's an hour-long conversation. The Candace that exists today is much different from the Candace that I sat down with 5 years ago, but we're all different. We all change. And if I start seeing certain things that I'm expecting to see from her over the next couple of years, I will address that further. We'll just leave that alone. So when Candace had this podcast at PragerU, my assumption is this. My assumption is that she went to PragerU right after Turning Point USA. She didn't know the podcasting business. So PragerU was like, here's a check, here's a flat fee, and we're going to build out a studio, and we're going to do all this other stuff, and you're going to have a podcast, and it's going to be with us. And what I think is this. I think that she got smart about what was going on. She got smart about the numbers. She got smart about the business. She got smart about doing all that, used them to help her. They used her to help build that YouTube channel, which, by the way, that YouTube channel still exists. So my guess is that they own it. And they're still getting a certain amount of money for views from all those interviews that she did, right? And so this is the business element of all this. My assumption is that she didn't know that side of the business, got a flat fee, while they made all the money, and she also didn't own the YouTube page. I think that this alleged 8-figure deal that she got from Daily Wire was her knowing the business and her saying, I'm going to generate you this much revenue via merch, via subscriptions, via YouTube revenue, via sponsors, via all that stuff. Instead of me coming in with a team whose job it is to negotiate all this stuff and track all this stuff and a lot of stuff, because I'm telling you guys, it's a lot of work. And if you don't know what you're doing in this business, I've worked in the media business for the better part of 15 years at this point. Because before I got into all of this stuff, I did ad sales and I did media buying and I did media planning and I did all of that stuff. So I know that world. And I worked on Madison Avenue as an ad exec. So I know what I'm talking about here. So my assumption is when DW came to her, she was like, you know what? Let me just get the bag. and let me get as much money as I possibly can from this so that their staff can worry about this. And let me tell you something, it's not a bad thing to do. Like, it's not a bad route to go. If you're somebody that really wants to focus just on your content and you don't want to focus on getting studio space and getting sales and doing all this stuff, and like, it's a lot of work, my guess is that she just did that. So now the question is, what's next? Like, what's next for Candace? And I was having a conversation with one of the guys that staffs my podcast, the person that helps me with the YouTube presence and all that stuff. Because you get the thumbnails and you got the episodes and you get 2 camera shoots and it's very interesting. It's very fun to be learning this stuff from the ground up, because eventually, I'll get to the point where this is going to be like, this will be housed somewhere else. Eventually, people have already been in touch with me about it, but I'm just not there right now. So what's the next step? A lot of people think that Candace could just go independent. Fine. And yes, she could go independent and she could make more money eventually going independent. My guess is that she will not, because in order to be independent, you have to not only know so much about the business, you actually have to care about seeing yourself as a business owner. So a part of what I'm doing with this podcast is now looking at myself both as host and talent, but also as business owner. I do not feel that she cares that much about the business side of it. I think that it is more important for her to get her point across. So I do not think that she's going to go independent. What I do think is that she will go to, there's a couple different places she can go to. Actually, really only 2 right now. Fox would never have her. And plus cable news is dying right now. Why would she go to cable news so that nobody would see her? There's a lot of people that said that she had been doing that had noticed she'd been doing some things with Valuetainment, which is Patrick Bet-David's company. And I think that she'll continue to do things with them. I don't think that she will go there. I don't think that she'll have a show there. He's building a media company, building a media empire. I've been to the Valuetainment studios. It's awesome. I've done the PBD podcast. I'll probably do it again. I've done a couple of other podcasts. I'm thinking that she probably will not do that, which leads us to, I know Bongino's got something that's coming up. I do not think that she will go there, which leaves us with the Tucker Carlson network. And so it's really one of 2 things. Either she goes to Tucker or she sort of starts building her own media empire. I don't see her as building her own media empire because I don't see her as that interested in the business. I see her interested in other things, but maybe she could. Who knows? But I think it'll be very interesting to see where she goes next. And I wanted to give you a little bit of insight from somebody that actually does know the media business, that is a media professional, as opposed to, the brokey libs talking about, oh, Candace is broke now. You know nothing about the business. You know nothing about nothing. And by the way, when you talk about the business of Candace Owens, she tweeted out a link to basically give her money. It was like an Act Blue or an Act Red, political donation page. But no, this is donation pages purely to go to Candace Owens. All right. So there's that. There's the Blexit organization that she founded that has now been, as I understand, sold to Turning Point USA. So Turning Point USA and Blexit are going to be doing things together. So there's a lot of moving parts in the business of Candace Owens. And the one thing that I am totally sure of, the one thing that you can quote me on, the one thing that I would bet my life on is that Candace Owens is not broke and will never be broke. And is past the point of, by the way, not even mentioning the fact that she's basically married into British royalty. This woman has been past the point of thinking about money for years at this point. So brokey libs acting as if she's broke, it tells me that they know nothing about the business. And it does not surprise me that so many of my black friends on the left know so little about business, particularly the liberal commentators who all do the same thing. They all do the same thing. They want to be a New York Times bestselling author. They want a Sirius XM satellite radio show, and they want to be a cable news contributor. I don't even begrudge their misguided ideas. I don't even begrudge them the fact that they're the real grifters, because if you're a black liberal in media or whatever, like that's the real grift. I don't even begrudge them any of that. The thing that I begrudge them is, why is it that so few of them are taking their platforms into their own hands and building something that they own, as opposed to, yet again, working for somebody else? That's neither here nor there. Candace Owens is not broke. And this is a woman that will never be broke. This is a very wealthy woman. All right, the LGBTQ takeover of the public school system is in full effect now. Before I get into this sort of LGBTQ education that is going to be mandated in 6 states, let's give this all a little bit of context as to where we are in the public school system at this point. Now, it has become a bit of a battleground since the COVID pandemic. Now, a lot of people probably don't, you have to be really into politics and really into Twitter and really into the media to understand what's going on here, because it's still happening. But there was a very big moment when there were a lot of parents that now their kids were home, their kids were doing online learning, doing the Zooms, doing all that other stuff. And then some parents were kind of like walking behind their kids and looking on the computers and, not really liking the things that they were seeing that their kids were learning. Their kids were learning 100 genders. Their kids were learning BLM. Their kids were learning the pride flag, all this other stuff. So in that sort of 2021-ish era, it became a huge thing. So you have a lot of parents that are standing up, going to school board meetings, reading from books that are being recommended to kids that are, quote unquote, in the LGBTQ experience, that are actually graphically sexual and all of these things that kids really shouldn't be exposed to. And then this became a culture war thing. What this country likes to do right now is they like to turn everything into a culture war that means Democrats good, Republicans bad. Why are these evil Republicans trying to ban these books? And so what's wrong with looking at everything from this binary left, right, Democrat, Republican frame is that we are now making every parent that wants to have a say in their child's education and who thinks that maybe their kids shouldn't be reading about graphic sexuality, gay or straight, at a certain age in school, that this is now a part of this evil Republicans. By the way, if you really want to get into it, the Merrick Garland Department of Justice, which was basically directed to investigate some of these parents that were standing up at these school board meetings. It's a very real thing. Google it. It happened. And so this stuff is going on. So this stuff is now a flashpoint. And as a gay man, and everybody that listens and everybody that watches, everybody knows I'm gay, never been in the closet, not a thing. I don't want to both sides everything, because I feel like when you both sides things, it makes you seem like a fence sitter, which I don't want to be. But I'm going to break down. I'm going to tell you exactly why I can see sort of both sides of the equation. They want to mandate what they are calling a quote-unquote LGBTQ inclusive curriculum. Now, this is from NBC News. NBC News has a LGBT propaganda vertical called NBC Out. I did some work for them years and years ago, back when I was a lib, and I kind of exited away from it because I was like, I just don't want to do propaganda for people. I'm not here to do propaganda. So this article is called, and by the way, the vertical is filed under as transgender kids. I have no idea what this has to do with quote-unquote transgender kids. I don't believe in transgender kids because no child is born in the wrong body, but that is neither here nor there. Anyway, article is called Amid Book Bans, DEI Cuts, and quote, Don't Say Gay Laws. We'll get into the journalistic malfeasance that is that in a minute. 7 states will mandate LGBTQ inclusive curricula. Washington will join 6 other states in requiring public schools to include LGBTQ inclusive curricula. So I'm going to read this for you. I'm going to read this from the NBC piece. I'm going to give you my take on this. And there's so many different things going on here. First of all, is that this piece is pure propaganda. Washington Governor Jay Inslee, a Democrat, signed into law last week that includes a mandate for the state's public schools to teach LGBTQ history as red and blue states continue to diverge on whether schools should expose kids to gay and transgender identities. The new law, Senate Bill 5462, mandates that the state school districts adopt curricula that is as, quote, culturally and experientially diverse as possible, including the histories of LGBTQ people, people of color, and people with disabilities. Schools will be required to institute the inclusive curricula by the 2025-26 school years. Blah, blah, blah. Couple different things happening right here. And this is where some of my friends on the right side of the aisle, this is where they get mad at me. This is what I'm called. He's not a real conservative. I'm not a real anything. I'm a real independent. I'm the real Rob Smith. That's who I am. If this was just going to be in high school, and this was just going to be about gay and lesbian history, I can get behind that. Because gay and lesbian history is a part of American history. And when I say gay and lesbian history, I'm not talking about 100 genders. I'm talking about the, fight against the healthcare system and to get the federal government involved when it comes to HIV/AIDS. I'm talking about the fight to get gays and lesbians the right to be married. I'm talking about the fight, and if you want to Google me, I was involved in this fight, the fight for gays and lesbians to be able to serve openly in the military without being fired. And just the Stonewall stuff, like there are parts of American history that gays and lesbians were absolutely a part of. And I think that there is a learning value to that. Okay. But we're not dealing with people that are interested in learning and facts and education. We are interested in we are dealing with people that are interested in promoting their propaganda. So these kids are not going to learn about Harvey Milk. These kids are not going to learn about the don't ask, don't tell rule in the military. These kids are not going to learn about the fact that in order for marriage equality to happen, there had to be both Democrats and Republicans that had to come together in a certain capacity to agree on that, right? So the real history is not being taught. There are people that do not even know that 3 Trump-appointed judges were the ones that Supreme Court judges were the ones that made the Supreme Court rule, which added LGBT to the list of federal protected identities. There are people that still don't know that. My best friend is a lib, and I told him this. He thought I was lying, and he had to Google it. So there's so much that is just not shared. And so my fear with this is one of two things. First of all, it's going to be a lot of 800 gender propaganda. All right. It's going to be a lot of, Heather has 2 mommies and mommy number 1 is pansexual and agender and also has 300 different genders. Like, it's going to be that stuff. It's not going to be real history. It's not going to be real American history because it's just not going to be. It's going to be that. And that's the unfortunate thing about this. And the unfortunate thing about where we are in the culture war at this point. When it comes to the LGBTQ, when it comes to the gays and lesbians, whatever you want to call it, I don't personally like LGBTQ because it makes everybody that's gay or lesbian, it puts us into this sort of blob of the LGBTQ, of the polyamorous and the agenders and the 100 genders and the non-binaries. And it just kind of puts gays and lesbians into like the blob of lunacy that the alphabet soup has become, the rainbow mafia, the alphabet soup, whatever. And so it's not going to be like gay historians that are really going to be thinking about, okay, there are these things that actually happen in American history that are actually about gays and lesbians. So how can we integrate this into, say, an American history? If you have kids that are learning about American history in the 70s, how can you integrate, or in the late 60s, early 70s, how can you integrate Stonewall into that, right? If you have kids that are learning about American history in the 80s, how can you integrate HIV/AIDS and the Reagan administration's response to this and the activism that rose up in order to get the federal government to wake up and pay attention to it? If you want to do it in the 90s or the 2000s, do you really want to do the path to how Democrats and Republicans in D.C. had to come together in order to make marriage equality the law of the land for gays and lesbians? There's value to that from an education standpoint. But like I said, that's not what you're going to be getting with this. And you haven't heard the last of this because I'll tell you something. What's going to happen is this. And this is where the reporting on this stuff is so important because you probably had no idea about this. And there's so much in both our mainstream, I don't even call it mainstream, there's so much in our legacy media that either ignores things like this or reports them from one place. And then if you see this story blogged and written up on Breitbart, it's just going to be, they want to teach your kids all this other stuff and gay history is irrelevant and why can't, it's going to be that. And then you're going to have a bunch of idiots in the comments section talking about how all gay people are pedophiles. And so that's kind of where we are in this country. It's bizarre, but there's a lot of people that expect and want for you to be stupid. And I don't even know that there's another way to say it, but there's a lot of people that are counting on your stupidity. And these people are as well. And we have not seen the last of this, I'm telling you. When the curriculum comes up, and I'll keep an eye on this, and I will come back to this. When the curriculum comes up, we will see exactly what it looks like. But I bet you it's going to be a lot of far left rainbow mafia gobbledygook. All right, Problematics, thank you so much for joining me. Please, please, please watch and subscribe to Can't Cancel Rob Smith on youtube.com/@Can'tCancelRobSmith. It helps with the algorithm. It helps when you share it. It helps when you do all that good stuff. Follow me on social media, X, Facebook, and Instagram @RobSmithOnline. And you can listen to this podcast, the audio version of this podcast, on Apple Podcasts, iHeart Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. I'll see you next time, Problematics.